You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us again this week. I always look forward to our time here on the podcast and online via our YouTube channel and having the opportunity to connect about some of these platform-related topics that we talk about here. And this week, we're going to be talking about this idea of a media kit. Now, live on the call here with me are members of our Platform Launchers Members Club. And we were just talking briefly about media kits and what they entail and what they include. Some of us have been using them for a while. Some of us are brand new at developing our platforms and don't have them created yet. Maybe if you're listening to me right now via the podcast or watching online, maybe this isn't something you're familiar with. And so I'm going to explain what a media kit is. And basically my theme with this is this idea of developing a media kit that attracts advertisers. So be thinking about that. What does a media kit entail? And how can a media kit be something that's actually useful for attracting advertisers? Now, let me give you a little story here, a little bit of background on how I came into creating a media kit that connects with my platform. Basically, after a few years of writing books and recording podcasts and creating blog posts and sending out a weekly newsletter, I received an email from a company that was familiar with my work. They were familiar with the things that I was doing. And before I tell you what their email said and what made it so special, I will get to that in a few minutes. Let me give you some additional backstory on how this company even became familiar with what I'm doing. So several months before I received this special email that I'm going to tell you about in a minute, what I actually did was I spoke for a leadership conference at a local university, and it was an annual event. It's something that I'd spoken at in the past, but I wasn't on the roster to actually speak this particular year until the last minute. What had happened is they had a last-second cancellation, and so they asked me if I would be willing to fill in and lead a workshop and speak at this event. And of course, I was willing to do so, and they seemed grateful, and so that's what I did. And then at the end of the conference, and I suspect that you'll get a kick out of this, but at the end of the conference, I was handed a thank you card. And here's what I assumed, and I don't think I was out of line for assuming this, but I assumed that inside that card that there would be maybe a check or an honorarium of some kind, just basically paying me something for the fact that I spoke, because that's typically how events like this were handled at the university. But when I opened that card, there wasn't a check inside. Instead, there was a $5 gift card to Dunkin' Donuts. So that's what was in there, a $5 gift card to Dunkin' Donuts. And I remember just laughing about it. I chuckled about it because it seemed like a very entertaining form of compensation to offer a speaker who had just bailed out a major portion of an event. But either way, I was very happy to have served them. I was happy to have served the leaders who attended, but I just remember sitting in my car as I opened up that thank you card and seeing that $5 Dunkin' gift card. And I thought, this was an interesting choice. I bailed out a third of this event. 1/3 of this event came down to me speaking at this, and was given a small little gift card. It was something, but it was kind of entertaining to me. But the event, it also had a major advertising sponsor. And the major advertising sponsor that was at this event was a software company that served the kinds of leaders that were attending the conference. This company happened to like my presentation, and they actually contacted me afterward to see if I would be interested in working together with them in the future. And what they wanted to do was they said they'd like to pay me $500 to lead a monthly leadership seminar. And it didn't have to be very long. They just wanted it to be like a webinar that they could post online and say, hey, jump online. John's going to be talking about this leadership concept. And it would be maybe about an hour, maybe a little more, a little less. And they said, each time you do that with us, we'd like to pay you $500. And so I said, yeah, I'd be happy to do this. And so I partnered with them on this idea, and we did that for a while. And after several months of working together, we became very familiar with each other, developed a wonderful relationship, and they started to become familiar with my online platform in general. And they sent me the email that I mentioned earlier. And their email contained a question that up to that point, I hadn't received before. They wanted to know if I would be willing to allow them to advertise in my weekly newsletter? And if so, they wanted to know what my advertising rates would be. And I remember reading that and thinking about it for a second. And I thought, man, I love this question. And I was very excited to give them a suggested number. But up to that point, I hadn't really thought about what my advertising rates ought to be. And so before I replied, I actually took time to sit down at my computer and I wanted to figure it all out. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about this and trying to figure out what I want to share with them. And I'll also tell you this, in the weeks leading up to receiving that question from them via email, I had also read several articles about the benefits of creating a media kit. But at this point, I had not taken action on that for my platform. It was just something in the back of my mind that I thought about as something that eventually I ought to do. Now, if you're not familiar with a media kit is essentially a rate sheet. And it allows potential advertisers to learn more about you and the content that you create and your overall platform and the size of your audience. That's the type of information that you want to include in a media kit. And the information or the email that I received that afternoon, it was the impetus that I needed to finally get my media kit created. And when I put it all together, and when I decided on my rates for all sorts of things like newsletter ad space, podcast advertising, guest blog posts, banner ads on my website, things like that, I emailed the file as an attachment, and then I waited. And I thought maybe they'd get back to me the same day, but I didn't hear anything. And I waited some more, and a day went by, and another day went by, and I didn't hear anything. And finally, several weeks went by before I heard a reply. And I'll even mention this just to see what would happen. When I was putting that media kit together, I actually included one option on that media kit that was priced much higher than the rest of the options. I offered a banner ad on my website for $1,200 per month. And I figured that even though that option probably wasn't likely to be chosen, it could at least serve as something that made the other options on my media kit look inexpensive by comparison. Well, fast forward a couple more weeks, and I eventually heard a reply from the company. I was sitting down at my kitchen table. I was eating lunch with my oldest daughter, and I looked at my phone, and my phone lit up to notify me that I had an email. And so when I opened the email, I learned that the company, they no longer wanted to advertise on my newsletter. They didn't want to advertise on that. Instead, they wanted that expensive banner ad, and they wanted to set it up as soon as possible. And so I had been waiting to hear if they were going to advertise in the newsletter, but it ended up getting much better. They wanted that most expensive option, that banner ad. So as you could imagine, I was thrilled. It ended up being a very like a real win-win scenario for us both. They gained more exposure for their company, and I started earning consistent advertising revenue from my platform. And in fact, they ran that banner ad for 2.5 years and paid me a total of $36,000 to do so. And on top of that, they also continued to pay me $500 a month to lead webinars for much of that time. So when I think back on that, I think, it's not a bad financial return when you consider the fact that our connection took place the same day that I received my lowest speaking fee that I had ever accepted, a $5 gift card to Dunkin' Donuts. But that really paid off. I'm so glad that I participated in that event for many reasons, including the fact that it forged this relationship with this software company. And so as I tell you that story, and as I just kind of reveal how I got started in providing an opportunity like this for people to advertise with me, I just want to ask you a question, and that's this. Do you have a media kit prepared for your platform? If a potential advertiser contacted you today and they asked you to send them a list of your advertising rates, would you be able to get back to them right away? Creating a media kit is not something that's difficult, but I think it's probably helpful to know how to set one up. So I'm going to give you, in the remainder of our time here, I'm going to give you a simple outline that I came up with just a few years ago after looking at multiple examples and then deciding what would be important to include on my media kit. This is the outline that I use. And by the way, my media kit has been serving me very well. ever since the day I first created it. And again, it's not hard to set one up. And also, I'll say this, and I mentioned this to our members before we started this week's podcast. These are suggestions that I'm giving you. You can amend this however you want. You can make this as long or as short as you want, although I would recommend not making it too long, and you'll see why in just a second. But if you want to create a media kit that's a couple pages, that's great. If you want to create a media kit that's one page and just has a few simple options, also great. It's not hard to set up, but I do want to give you an outline that I think will help you at least get started if this is something that you haven't done before. So the first element that I think should be on your media kit is just an overview of your platform. So that's number one, just a platform overview. And what the platform overview does is it gives potential advertisers a big picture glimpse of what you're creating. It allows them to understand more about your primary message. It allows them to learn a little bit more about your typical audience. It allows them to learn more about the ways in which you're reaching the people you serve. You're giving them an overview of your platform. And my recommendation is when you share this information, do so with a tone of purpose and enthusiasm. Be upbeat, be positive. Don't be dry. Don't be lifeless when you're trying to paint a picture of the heart behind what you've created. Keep this section, keep all the upcoming sections relatively brief. Maybe for this section, just 3 paragraphs, something like that. But be enthusiastic, be purposeful. Give them a picture of your overall platform, but also what motivates you to make this kind of content, because I think your motivation might be a little bit contagious for them. And if they can hear a little bit more of your heart and what motivates you, I think that that can be something that is helpful when you're trying to forge a new relationship. All right. The second part that I think that you should include in your media kit is this: an about section with pictures. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the about section, it allows advertisers to learn more about you. So the first section, they're learning about your platform. But in the second section here, they're learning about you. And I think in general, they're curious about the platform in general first. That's why I list that first in my media kit. But right away, the second section, you want to make it about you, have some pictures. In some ways, I would liken it to like a small resume. And if they're going to begin working with you, they're going to want to know more about you. So it makes sense to include this kind of information. So like I said, include your picture, or even if you have a family picture, you can include a family picture. I don't see any harm in that. Describe your relevant credentials. So if you have any credentials that make you kind of an authority in your space, you can describe those things. You can describe any achievements that you've had in this particular space. I think that's highly relevant. Again, be brief and be honest. And I would say do this without sounding overly boastful. So some people, I feel like they almost come across as boastful instead of factual. So you want to be factual. You want to list the important things, but you don't want it to sound boastful. And you also don't want to be overly self-deprecating in the sense that you don't want to treat this like what you've done doesn't really matter. What you've done does matter. It's a big part of your credentialing. It's part of your authority in what you're creating related to your platform. And so just share honestly about what you're doing and do so enthusiastically, but let people know what credentials you, let people know about some of your successes. Basically, what I'm encouraging you to do is to put yourself in your advertiser's shoes and tell them the kind of things that you'd like to know about someone that you were considering working with. And if you include that information, I think that that could be very helpful to allow an advertiser or a potential advertiser to get to know you at least a little bit better. All right. The third thing that I would encourage you to utilize or include on your media kit is a detailed list of your platform channels and their analytics. Now, what I mean by that is this. So this next section, it should basically list the various ways that you share content and the numbers that demonstrate your audience reach. So this is the section on which I speak about my podcasts. I speak about my books. I talk about my blog. I talk about my newsletter. I talk about my YouTube channel. And I also talk about the number of people that regularly utilize each channel of my platform. And it's this description that will help an advertiser understand the potential value that they will receive when they gain access to your audience. Because they're going to look at these different channels through which you're delivering content. They're going to see how many people you're actually reaching via these channels. And that's going to translate to value in the mind of a potential advertiser. And just like in the about section, you include a picture of yourself or maybe a picture of your family. I also think it's useful that in this section here, as you're talking about your platform channels and their analytics, that you include some cover art from your books and your podcasts and things like that. Just have a little picture of the cover art so that they could see what these things look like. It helps people develop a visual. It helps them realize that what you're creating isn't theoretical, it's something actual. All right, number 4 on the media kit list is this: your advertising options and your rates. And it might actually be best to list your advertising options and your rates on a separate dedicated page. So you could have the other things I just listed all on one page potentially, but then have a separate page that just has your advertising options and your rates. Just do it on a dedicated page if you can, if you have enough options to kind of dedicate a page to that. That's what I do at least. And basically what you're doing is you're just trying to list every logical option you can think of related to your advertising options and how much you charge for them. So you'll put things on there like how much you'll charge for an ad in your newsletter, or how much you would charge for a podcast outro, or how much you would charge for a banner ad. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, I put a banner ad on mine and I said $1,200 a month. And that's what my first advertiser decided to utilize. You'd also put what you would charge someone to post something as a guest on your blog. So like a guest blog post, what would it cost for them to share something on your blog? Or an entirely different option that I didn't suggest there. But basically include every idea that you can think of that might be of interest or value to a potential advertiser, because they might surprise you with what they select. And some advertisers might pick several things. And don't be afraid to have something on there that's expensive. Even if nobody uses it, what it ends up doing is it makes your other options look inexpensive by comparison. So don't be afraid to have something on there pricey, and don't even worry about whether someone selects it or not. Just have it there because it's really going to, I think, in some respects, demonstrate the value of the other things that you're providing. Now, the 5th and final thing that I would encourage you to have on your media kit, and I think this should be obvious, but having seen some media kits, I've realized this is not terribly obvious to everybody. But the 5th thing I would suggest that you have on there is very simply your contact information. So those who are reading your media kit are going to want to know how to easily contact you. And I think a lot of times people think that the person they send the media kit to is the only person that's going to be looking at it, but it's entirely possible that your media kit is going to be shared with people who did not make the initial contact with you. And so if you're assuming that because the person you started with has your contact info, that you don't need to have it on the media kit, I think that's a mistake. But if you do include your contact information at the bottom of your media kit, I think it looks very professional. I think it makes it much easier for potential advertisers to reach you when they're interested in advertising on your platform. Don't assume that they already have your contact info. And this is bonus. This isn't even something that you would put on your media kit, but there's one last thing that I'll mention that I think can be practical and useful, and that's this. Periodically, take a look at your media kit and revise it. Look at it and update it, because your platform is always in a state of development. Your audience over time is going to grow. Your analytics are going to improve. And that means the rates that you charge are going to increase right along with the value you provide. I make a point to update my media kit several times each year to reflect the current state of my platform. I would advise you to do the same, because your numbers are going to grow. You're going to develop more channels through which you're delivering content. Your analytics are going to improve. And as your platform grows, you could demand higher prices and offer different options that maybe you didn't think about initially when you first created that media kit. So don't hesitate to revise it. Don't hesitate to update it. Just like your platform is always a work in progress, your media kit, therefore, which reflects your platform, is also going to be a work in progress. So I hope that that list is helpful for you. If you want to read up on it more, I have this shared as a blog post at platformlaunchers.com. Just head over to the website. You could read more about media kits and some of the other tools and systems that we recommend when you're developing your online platform, because your goal is to build, grow, and monetize that online platform. And this can be a very helpful tool when you're trying to monetize what you have built. Also, I just want to remind you, as I do each week, that if you would like to be part of our members club for platform launchers, you could attempt that or try that for free at platformlaunchers.com. For the next 2 weeks, you could be part of our members club and take a test drive and see if you like it, see if it's helpful for you. We have a ton of video content at this point now in our training vault that will teach you directly how to build, grow, and monetize your online platform. And then the other benefit of being part of the members club is that you get to interact with all the members, which is, I think, the most fun part of the members club. So again, stop by our website and take the 2-week test drive. If you think that would benefit you, I'm certain it would benefit you if you're trying to build an online platform. We'll show you how to do it. We'll show you how to do it right. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for spending a little time with us, and we look forward to catching up with you again next time. Have an awesome week.